I have always been a very strong supporter of school uniform, and I still am. The way I see it, there's no reason why there should not be a strong uniform policy in schools across the United States. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Explore and Engage with Anam. For those who have been listening to my podcast for a while, I thank you for your support from the bottom of my heart. For new listeners, I welcome you to join me in this journey. And I call this a journey because that's what podcasting really is. The journey begins as a podcaster starts to express his or her thoughts and feelings on a variety of issues, or perhaps presents knowledge about a specific subject matter, or maybe responds to things happening in the world. In any case, podcasting takes time. Episode after episode, a podcaster keeps moving forward. In the process, the person may alter one's style of speaking, change equipment, bring in guests, and so much more. I started last year, and here I am, still podcasting, still moving forward. And I could not have done it without the support that I have received from my listeners. Now, today's topic, as you may have already guessed, is about school uniform. Growing up in the city of Dhaka, in the country of Bangladesh, in South Asia, it never occurred to me that there could be an alternative to wearing school uniform. But obviously, here in the United States, children in so many schools across the country do not have to follow any such requirement. Now, obviously, there are educational institutions that have uniform policy, a lot of private schools and those with religious affiliations, but it seems that most do not. The question is, what is school uniform and why is it so important? As the name says, uniform. Everyone wears the same type and color of clothing for as long as they are on school premises, or even perhaps when they're out on the field on school-approved trips if required by the institution. I wore school uniform pretty much all of my life, and that only changed when I started going to a university. My favorite school uniform was white shirt with deep blue pants and white shoes. Some schools had, and I'm sure they still have in Bangladesh, white shirts with either deep green or brown or black pants. Some schools require ties to be worn, and in the case of girls could wear skirts or shalwar kameez with dupatta, which is a more traditional type of clothing in the part of the world where I was born and raised. And so if you do not know what shalwar kameez and dupatta are, feel free to look these up on the internet, as you will see images of such clothing. The combination of colors were usually always solid, with no fancy prints or checks or stripes, almost always solid colors, which I believe look simple and neat. On specific days, for example, when we would have sporting events, students would wear appropriate athletic clothing, but also following the guidelines of the school, guidelines from the school. I have written about this topic. I wrote a letter to the editor supporting school uniform. I believe it was back in 2019, and today I feel compelled again to speak on this issue. Recently, there have been news about students not following dress codes during graduation ceremonies, and those incidents end up in the news and get a lot of publicity because those type of issues and news generate a lot of discussion. People are very divided on whether or not it matters if a student is dressed up properly for graduation ceremony or not. Reportedly, if a student violates the school's dress code, he or she may not be presented with a diploma on the day of the graduation ceremony. To a lot of people, it does not matter whether a student is following the school's dress code or not. To others, like myself, the dress code is extremely important. Let me tell you how strict an environment I grew up in. If a student in my school would not wear the proper uniform, then the school had every right to not allow that student to attend classes that day. The school could potentially call the parents and have them come and pick up their child early from school, which essentially meant the student would be sent back home, or the student could be removed from the classroom and be asked to sit outside the office of the teacher in charge for the rest of the day. In short, if proper uniform would not be worn, the student could not attend classes. Now, I'm going to elaborate further. To a lot of people, this may seem to be very strict. Some may call it harsh, but those were the rules that I had to follow. And I'm going to elaborate further. Not wearing proper school uniform did not only mean that a student wore the wrong type of shoe or shirt. It could mean that even if the student wore the right shoe or the right type of shirt, but let's say that the shoes were not cleaned properly or the shirt was not ironed properly, even things like that could be considered violations. My school was so strict that if a male student had hair longer than a certain length, that would be considered a violation of the code set by the school. If a female student with long hair did not tie her hair properly, that would be considered a violation too. School uniform does not simply mean wearing the right kind of clothes designated by the school. It also means going beyond the clothes and being proper in every way, such as staying clean, maintaining the hair, keeping the nails short, and more. The rules that I followed were designed to prepare a student for the real world by teaching discipline, by letting kids know that not following the rules could have serious consequences, by also involving parents to make sure that they were paying attention to their children, and overall by making sure that children would grow up to be responsible adults. In fact, our rules were so strict that we could not even bring any type of jewelry or any fancy accessory to the school. So earrings, dangly earrings, big ones, glittery, absolutely not allowed. No expensive belts, no unnecessary objects of any type that could potentially distract students from their coursework. These rules, as you can already tell, were not designed taking into account how people felt. The rules were strict, and every student had to follow the rules if they wanted to be in that particular school, or they could go somewhere else. Wherever a student would go in Bangladesh, and I can say this confidently, most schools would require school uniform. Now, why do I talk about Bangladesh and use that as an example? That's because it is a system that I have experienced and I know about. There are other countries where schools require uniforms. I'm not sure about each and every school, obviously, but many schools as far as I can guess. Some countries, I'll name them. New Zealand, I know New Zealand their schools have, I'm not sure if all schools, but I would guess many, if not most, have school uniform. England, India, I know India is a neighboring country to Bangladesh, and I'm sure that there are many more. Now in America, the system is different. So many schools across the country do not have school uniform policy. Schools have dress codes, but not a firm uniform policy. The United States, Americans, us, I'm an American, we are the greatest nation on earth, and I am proud to call myself an American. We do not have to replicate what other parts of the world do. Just because a policy is being followed in other countries, that does not mean that we have to have the same kind of policy and implement those policies and enforce them in the same way. However, the policy analyst in me is always looking for ways to make improvements in the way we do things. And in the field of education policy, I believe the discussion of school uniform is essential. And that is why I'm using my podcast to share my thoughts on the topic of school uniform and why I believe it is essential for children. In any given school, there are people from various backgrounds. There are ethnic differences among the student population. Some students are born in America, others are born overseas, and they are immigrants. Some students come from wealthy families, and others come from perhaps more financially challenged backgrounds, and there's more. It is essential to have an environment in the school so that none of these differences would matter. Students, when they are in school, they must all wear the same school uniform. The focus should be on learning, on education. The message should be loud and clear that as long as students are in school, they are all the same and they will be treated as such. The only thing that matters in schools, the only things that matter in schools are education, punctuality, attentiveness, proper behavior towards other students, and respect towards teacher and school staff. Now, of course, out in the real world, people face so many odds, obstacles, barriers that they have to overcome, challenges, and there are many distractions. But people learn to deal with those things as they age, as they mature, as they develop a better understanding of the world. But in the formative years, we must ensure that children are able to focus on what matters most, which is good education. In this day and age, there are many divisions. There are partisan divisions, and those divisions affect the lives of people who simply want to live in peace and focus on their own personal and family priorities. Political divisions also exist in school districts, as we have seen in recent years. I believe that children should be kept away from anything that sows the seed of conflict. And I'm going to repeat this. Children, I believe, should be kept away from anything that sows the seed of conflict. To have a healthy generation of future leaders of this country, we must provide children with the tools that they need to be successful through knowledge. And that means not letting race or ethnicity or economic status or anything else like that disrupt the pursuit of education. We must also avoid any partisan discussion in the classroom. The focus in the classroom should only be on education, free from political bias. And I believe that school uniform would play a huge role in ensuring a proper environment for education. It does not have to be one size fits all. Each school district may be able to determine the right color of clothing and also figure out what type of shirts or pants the students should wear depending on the climate of that region. People have, they may perhaps have a certain type of clothing for the summer months and something else for the cooler months. Also, with any such policy, there would be room for exceptions. Depending on documented religious or health reasons, there should be room for allowing certain students to tailor their uniform in specific ways, such as having a longer or a shorter sleeve, having the ability to wear a hat or a cap, and much more. There are reasons why uniform is a requirement in many fields. For example, those who serve in law enforcement and the military have to wear uniform because uniform helps ensure discipline and teamwork as well as a strong sense of personal and professional responsibility. I think it is time for elected officials at the state and local level to strongly consider implementing school uniform policy. We want children to grow up in a very proper and disciplined way and become excellent, hard-working adults in the future. School uniform would be very helpful to improve our education system for our country's children. I believe in continuous improvement. Let's consider implementing school uniform policy in our education system here in the United States. These are my thoughts. Please share with me what you think. Connect with me on social media. Send me a message. Let me know what your views on this important topic of school uniform are. And also, if you like this episode, please share a link to it on your social media page. Share it with friends and family. And I would really appreciate if you do that. Thank you once again. I hope to be back again with another episode of Explore and Engage with Anam.